constantly that they're looking to change the way that they're learning strategies or the way that they're delivering learning and internally, and that's the reason because they have such an influx of millennials that are coming into the workplace, and they're having a hard time keeping up with the needs of this generation labeled as millennials. So that's what I wanted to talk to today, and I do believe that there's concepts out there that you can incorporate in your organization's learning and development department, and how you leverage L&D to really help retain them, because millennials are very, very quick to either A, start looking for other opportunities while they're working for you because their needs aren't being met, or they will just job hop immediately. And so that's something that you want to avoid, and one way to do that is through learning and development. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. So just a kind of brief introduction of what we do here at New Horizons. We deliver range of technical application, business skills training. We also do a lot of custom content development services. We consulting practice, capabilities developing for L&D, including management practice. So we're not just a technical training tool. And the results that one example of that we have the ability to learn for our clients and workplace, and as well those offerings that we do here. That being said, because you did So it's really, really interesting to me that when I came across some of these facts, for example, what you see here listed here, right now millennials make up 25% of the U.S. workforce as of today, but they really do anticipate that number to grow dramatically by 2030, which is they're going to make up 75% of the U.S. workforce, and that's huge because when you think about that. Millennials have very specific needs. I call them the trophy kids, and I call them the trophy kids because they were the kids that went to T-ball, they went to whatever sport that they were participating in as a kid, and everybody was given a trophy. Win, lose, it didn't matter. It wasn't like that when I was a kid. We didn't get participation trophies, and I was born in the mid-'70s to give you an idea of how old I am. So I never got a trophy unless I earned it. I had to win it. My team had to win a tournament or something in order for us to collect trophies. Kids nowadays, and in this generation, the mindset has changed a bit. They want to be a little bit more equal playing field, if you will. And so participation earns you a trophy. So that has kind of come along and kind of helped spoon feed, if you will, a lot of the different needs that come out of a millennial, which I find very interesting. But back to the facts here. So you'll also notice here that 81% of millennials use YouTube. Just recently I participated at the ATD local chapter here for Houston, the technology conference, where I was on a panel for discussing 2016 e-learning trends. My topic was microlearning, which in my opinion, YouTube is a perfect example of what microlearning is. It's something tangible you can get right now in short bit chunks, 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes long, on something you absolutely have to have right now. I use it daily. I cook a lot in my house. In fact, I do all the cooking at home. I always use YouTube to find either new recipes or new cooking techniques because I'm a big foodie and I'm kind of a nerd in that sense. 86% of millennials own a smartphone. Everyone. And in fact, as far as I'm concerned, most people nowadays, not just millennials, but multi-generations, including my parents that are Greek immigrants who have no business owning smartphones, own smartphones. 63% don't think their leadership skills are being fully developed by their company. This is going back to that need. They have to, they really look towards their employers to help fulfill specific needs, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. But that's a fact that really kind of raised an eyebrow with me, because that tells me that they're not looking at their company as a viable source to help them develop themselves in terms of career and their career path. 87% think a company's success should not be measured on financial performance, but should include a larger purpose. That, again, goes back to one of their needs. They need more than just a paycheck. They need to feel like they're working for someone that is bigger and greater than them in terms of a cause and what their companies are trying to accomplish outside of just hitting financial numbers at the end of each quarter. 44% have turned down job offers because of companies' values doesn't match their own. These are the hopeful generation. They want bigger and better things for themselves and for their organizations. They want to contribute to the world's problems. They want to solve the world's problems, and they want to know that they were part of something like that that was heading in that particular direction. This is a very interesting, to me, that fact right there was a very, very interesting fact, and really stood out to me because it goes along a lot along with, if you see some of the startups that have happened that were started by millennials, for example, like Facebook and Tom's, the shoes, for those that may know what Tom's shoes are, and Warby Parker and other things where it's the Tom's, for example, the buy one, give one. You know, you buy a pair of shoes from Tom and they contribute, they give back a pair of shoes to, I believe it's over in Africa or somewhere in an impoverished nation. So, you know, they're looking for something like that to be a part of. Again, contributing back to the world's problems and knowing that they're part of that. And then you've got 44% have turned down job offers. Oh, I've already mentioned that one, excuse me. So 28.9% are last millennial fact, say that they are not engaged at work. Actually, that should say not engaged. So that's, I'm sorry, that is correct fact. I spelled that one correctly. 28.9% they are engaged at work. Only 28.9% of your millennial workforce is engaged. That's telling. That's huge. And in order for us to engage them, I believe, and I think it's been proven that you can do that through learning and development. Just to kind of point out some generational differences here. So if you look at the millennials, which I have listed here on the left-hand side, and you look at the baby boomers that you see on the right-hand side, and some facts that you look in between. Going back to what I mentioned earlier at the top of the call, millennials are the kind of people that if they're not getting fulfilled, they're immediately looking in the opposite direction, which is away from your company and looking for the next company that's going to fulfill those needs. Here's a quick question, if you can do by raise of hand, okay, for those of you that are out there. Is there anyone on this call that falls into the classification of the generation of a millennial? By raise of hand. No one on the call is a millennial. That's fantastic, because this is perfect for you. You need this information. This is great. Is anybody here a baby boomer or of the Generation X or Generation Y? Okay, so I see some hands going up. Kim and Sandy. Okay, great. So then you probably work with some millennials. I'm sure that some of you have millennials in the workplace, and you probably see some of this information, some of these characteristics or some of these traits that we're talking about here today. So if you look at here some of these interesting facts, so the millennials, 79% of them compared to 67% of baby boomers are actively looking for job opportunities. 79%. That's a huge number. That is massive. That's attrition at its finest. That literally puts a revolving door at the front door of your company with a sign over the top that says millennials use only. If you look at the next fact down there below, the average years at a job is only 3 years for a millennial compared to the baby boomer, which is 11 years, which is a significant difference. And I think this is really goes towards a lot of potential learning and development that lends to this. And I think that because a baby boomer and a millennial, they each learn differently. You know, millennials are the generation where they grew up with video games, they grew up with smartphones, they do 80-something% of their shopping, I believe. There's a statistic floating out there that there's a majority of them do a lot of online shopping, whether it's through their smartphone, their tablets, A lot of them I know don't own televisions, which I think is incredibly telling. They stream TV through their laptops, which in my opinion is crazy, because I like my TVs and I don't mind commercials. I find them entertaining. But I think it's because of the way that they learn and the way that the businesses are not adapting to the millennial generation is the reason why you have figures like this. We're only millennials averaging 3 years on a job. 83% are willing to relocate for the right opportunity compared to baby boomers, which is 58%. Me personally, I believe this kind of goes back to the millennials don't have a lot of responsibilities right now. When you think of a millennial, you don't think of mortgages, you don't think of families, you don't think of anything that really has them tied down to anything. They could literally pick up and leave and go wherever they want for the quote right opportunity or whatever fits their mold of what that right opportunity is. And 58% of baby boomers will only relocate for the right opportunity. And again, I think that goes back to that same fact, which is a baby boomer does have they have mortgages, they have, well, children that are in schools. They can't just be pulled out of a school and taken elsewhere. So, you know, there's a huge generational gap here that we're talking about. And then when you look at the, say that job search is more complex, 33% of millennials only think that, but 43% of baby boomers think that. And I think it's because a millennial is a little bit more technologically advanced than a baby boomer is. My father is a baby boomer. My father just got his first computer last year, which is terrifying for me because now I've become tech support for my father. But I guarantee that I don't do any tech support for any of my nephews and nieces that are all classified as millennials. So there you go for that one. Looks like we have a question. Okay. Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a question. I think there were some people that were commenting earlier about the baby boomer Generation X thing.
Gotcha, understood. Thanks. All right, I'll keep going then. Real quick, before I move on to the next slide, are there any questions or anything that we've discussed so far? Okay, we'll move on. And if any questions do come up, please feel free to ask. Stop me at any time, and Ken will address those.
I do
so
see,
now let's talk about the...
Tassos, I do see a comment from Sandy about, she says, one item impacting average years at job is the expectancy to advance quickly.
Yeah, that's, you know what, that's correct, Sandy. That is, you know, it's something that I talk about here in the next couple of slides, but since you brought that up, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Sandy. There is the mindset of a millennial and what they expect to earn in terms of placement within an opportunity, or how they expect to anticipate in their mind to climb up the quote corporate ladder is much different than people of an older generation. They have this self-entitlement mindset, and they want something of the now. They see that there are other millennials out there in tech startups and a lot of other startups that have literally blossomed overnight and have become massive successes, and it's because a lot of these folks that have done that are millennials have broken the rules. There's no rules in a millennial's mindset, and so that way they don't come into a company thinking, well, I have to do X, Y, Z things, and by year 5 or by year 10, I should have this type of role or this title or this type of position within the company. They're looking to advance pretty much in the next few years, and if they don't see that advancement, they're pretty much so I'll use that millennial. Sandy just mentioned is actually talking here, and with after you, we'll talk about how to retain through. More importantly than actually working for a company that has a purpose, and that purpose not being financials or hitting the numbers or stockholders or Wall Street. They want to be part of a company that actually has a cause, an agenda, something that is bigger and better than them, and they want to be part of it. They want to know that their contributions are working towards the common good. And that common good is not by lining CEOs or other, they're able to hit the numbers. This is a huge thing for millennials. They need a purpose. They were raised in a different time, right? They were raised in a time where we had the Afghanistan war. We had the Columbine shooting. We had the 2008 financial crisis. September 11. All these other major events, worldly events that occurred that happened in the millennial generation to want to rid the world of a better place. And they wanted to do that through, I'm going to dedicate myself 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week or the rest of my career for that matter for working for a company. I don't want to do it just for not just to be part of, but what they really want to do in terms of their contribution back to their organizations or to the world for that matter. Any questions on this? So how can we retain this through learning and development? Well, there's 3 steps here that I believe that you can incorporate into your organization to kind of help alleviate or mitigate this or fulfill this need, if you will, of purpose and meaning to a millennial. Teach your mission from the start. You know, every company, including our own here at New Horizons, we all have mission statements and value statements. And I think it's very, very important in order for you to reach out and communicate to the millennials that they matter, because their contributions are contributing to this, to our organization's purpose and what we're trying to achieve, or our mission, our value, is by teaching that company's mission, vision statement through onboarding. And don't just put it up on a slide, if you will, and just display it for a few seconds. It's something that needs to be taught. There's really creative ways where you can teach your mission, and then you can also incorporate different events around the company's mission statement and value statements to continue to contribute to that need of purpose for your millennials. Celebrate your history. You know, my background, a lot of my background's in consulting, and so I've had an opportunity to work for many, many different companies on many, many different scales, from small, medium to large, as well as across multiple industries, as Janet had pointed out at the top of the call. And you know, I've only really done some work, even from a consulting standpoint. I had to be in compliance by attending an onboarding session that one company out of the many I've worked for really celebrated their history, really communicated that to you. Loyalty is really seldom exists now in the workplace. Where, even myself and other people of my age generation, if you're in your 40s on up or even in your 30s for that matter, there's not a lot of loyalty that exists in the workplace anymore. It's not like your father where he went and he was really working for those 20 years to earn that set of steak knives or that gold watch or whatever that item was that that company would issue to more senior people that had stuck it out, if you will, with the company. But that kind of loyalty is out the window now. So you have to now as an organization build that loyalty by using a lot of different sources like media to celebrate your company's history. You can really create an emotional connection between you and your employees by celebrating this history. If you want to spotlight, you could spotlight different moments of the company's inception from beginning all the way through the timeline of its existence of major milestones that the company achieved and communicate that through your corporate communications and put that up on your intranet site and really kind of help establish that level of loyalty that a millennial is looking for. That will really help fill that need, and that can either be through corporate communications or that can be done through learning and development. You could put a little small blurb in front of, if you're developing curriculum, if you will, at the top of each one of your little modules, you could put a little different screenshot or different blurb of your company's history at the beginning to kind of help remind them of where we've come from and where we are today. Create the spotlight. I like doing this purposely. I do this here internally in my organization because I do have some millennials that actually work for me and work and report directly to me. And I immediately realized that this is something I would have to do to really keep them feeling like they're working towards something bigger and better than themselves. So what we do here, and what I've seen at other clients do this, is they'll spotlight their employees or they'll spotlight some of their top customers. They'll create a little profile of internal teams that live and breathe by the company's culture and values, and really is that company player that is doing it the right way, the way that the company had intended it. And so that really helps establish that level of encouragement that employees are looking to build that internal legacy. That's something very important to a millennial as well, is not only being part of a purpose to be part of something bigger than themselves that's working towards feeding that hopeful generation, if you will, but building an internal legacy for themselves is important too, but they also want to do it on the fast track, and that's the difference between a baby boomer or a Generation Y or Generation X as opposed to a millennial. They really want to do it. They want to see it yesterday, basically. But and that's something I do here. Like I said, I spotlight when I have a particular, either an instructional designer or a project manager or one of our graphics folks that was highlighted and showcased. I highlight and showcase them if they earn their kudos. We do weekly huddles here at New Horizons as an entire company, not just amongst my, not just in my division. And we have a point in our 15-minute company-wide huddle to announce kudos or to give recognition and spotlight some of our employees, because that's really key to helping kind of solidify that part of that side of our culture, because this organization in particular does have a lot of millennials that work here, and we want to make them feel like they're working towards that greater purpose. Any questions on this? Let me ask this question by a raise of hands. Does anyone in their organization currently does any of these three steps to in terms of teaching your mission statement and how you do it, and then celebrating your history and creating any kind of spotlighting employees or customers internally? I see one hand.
See two. There's
only one hand.
No, if you scroll down, I think it's Tolu.
Oh, Tolu. Okay. Yeah, I see Tolu. I only saw one pop up. Oh, I see now. I think I wasn't scrolling correctly, but yeah. Okay. So not that many though when you look at it. See, and to me that's something that's I don't want to say shocking, but again I think that lends to establishing and solidifying what type of culture that you want your people to be a part of every day. Because when you remember and you think about it, obviously we all know that we spend more time at work than we do at home with our loved ones. Even myself, who I do a lot of working from home, I kind of close myself off in my home office, and I don't come up for air until 6 o'clock at night most times. And even though my wife and kids are home, they don't see me that often, even though I'm working from home. But anyway, that's really interesting to learn that. I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you. Development. So development is something in terms of their own development, developing their new skills, developing their skill sets. They crave and starve for new skills. They really want you to feed them on a regular basis. It's as if you could take a funnel, right, and shove all these skill sets that you want for them to learn and cram it literally down their throats, because that's how much they want it and how much they crave it. They also crave career advancement. They don't like being stuck in the same spot, in the same position, working on the same project or on the same team for long. They want to see themselves advancing quickly. There's a recent study that showed that training and development was the #1 perk amongst millennials over cash bonuses or 401k. They come into an organization, they are more concerned with what kind of training you're going to provide me and how are you going to help me develop internally as an employee and within my field, whatever that field is, over money or 401k retirement. They don't even look at retirement. They don't even care at monetary values. They're more concerned with how are you going to help me get there quicker, which is really, really telling about millennials. Because no offense to a millennial, but my skill set, yes, eventually will turn into dollars down the road, but I've got a mortgage, I've got 3 children, I have a few cars, I've got responsibilities, I've got colleges, I have 2 daughters, I've got a couple of weddings I've got to pay for. Now granted they're only 5 and 3, but I've already started thinking about this, and I'm not worried about who's going to train me to obtain more skills. I need money. So, and me being in my 40s, that's what I think about, is where can I make more money and how can I make more money, as opposed to what kind of training program do you have. I never even asked that when I came on board here to New Horizons. I've never asked anyone, how are you going to train me? Not until when I was in my 20s that I asked that question, but as I got older, I wasn't too concerned with that. But the other trade-off is I've also been working a lot longer than a millennial has too. I've been doing this for 20 years consistently. Not that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been around the block a few times, as we all can probably say, in our fields and in our respective positions within our companies. So I'm not too concerned with what kind of training I can receive here at New Horizons. I'm more concerned with what kind of compensation plan do I get here, because I have responsibilities at home, whereas a millennial doesn't have a mortgage typically. They don't really typically have children, really, for that matter. They don't really have anything that ties them to. Heck, half of them don't own TVs. Their careers are really their focal point and their main priority. That's really all they focus on, is their careers and how they can advance quickly and where are they going to get to by the end of their run at that company. Like I mentioned, most millennials don't have financial responsibilities of other generations, so that really helps drive this internal development need, if you will, that they're willing to relocate, they're willing to do whatever they have to do, they're even willing to break rules, for that matter, to get higher up on the corporate ladder. In fact, in their mind, there's no such thing as a corporate ladder. They're looking for a corporate elevator. They want to be able to walk into that box, watch the door slide shut, hit a button, and advance immediately to the next floor. And that's, again, goes back to that trophy kid generation that I talked to, which I'm not faulting them for it. It's just it is what it is. But that's where that, I believe, strives from. That strives from. One of the many things that they've been incorporated as growing up as millennials is where that could potentially come from. They also realize that the world is moving fast. And, business is moving fast. I mean, technology changes in learning and development almost yearly. Actually, it does change yearly when you think about it. There's new buzzwords and new things that are coming out. And, part of our responsibilities as learning and development professionals is staying on top of that technical aspect of our business to make sure that we possess the skill set to be able to deliver our services not just to our clients, but to our internal clients and to our organizations, and to be able to retain our jobs so that way we can support our families, right? So, if you look at companies like Facebook and Tumblr and Instagram and anything, all those successful, very successful, of course, and all founded by millennials. And their cultures are very different than working here at New Horizons or working in an oil and gas company or working anywhere else. They do things a lot differently. And it's, in my opinion, a lot of companies need to look at that level of culture and how they deliver and feed these needs to millennials. And again, doing a lot of that can be done through learning and development. So with that being said, let's look at 3 ways that we can retain millennials through L&D in terms of development. You know, you can provide them on-demand development opportunities. Microlearning, microlearning, and microlearning. In my opinion, that is something that really fields this need to develop. They have to have skill sets given to them at the time when they need it. They don't have time to wait for the next class that's 5 days long and only 20% of that 5-day class pertains to what they actually need in order to get their job done at that moment. And microlearning is really the path to help feed that need of development for them. You know, microlearning gives you the ability to break out learning into very small bite-sized chunks that can be easily consumed, that can be easily found, easily searchable. It's incredibly searchable. It's easily accessible, and it's easily consumable. And it's something that millennials strive for. Again, microlearning to me is YouTube. It's the same concept. Small bite-sized chunk videos, and they don't have to be stellar production. They don't have to look like they came out of some massive production house. A lot of times when we're out working a project for a client, we get asked quite a bit to do a lot of microlearning, and the first thing they will tell us is we're not really concerned with stellar quality in terms of the look and feel of it. It doesn't have to have stellar graphics. It really just has to hit the mark. You've got to hit the target. What are we trying to convey to them in a 4-minute segment or a 5-minute video or even a 3-minute video? And are they really going to be able to walk away after consuming this video at 3 minutes and walk away and attribute that now to their job and apply it and then demonstrate how they've learned to use it back to their managers? That's what they need. Providing this on-demand development opportunity internally will really help feed this need of development to a millennial. Personalize the training. Again, it's going back to assessing what do you need and providing training specific to that role or specific to that need and relevant to their jobs. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, a lot of companies are going back and doing that one-size-fits-all approach by trying to get as many people in the room as possible to sit in this 1-day class or in this half-day class or in this 3-day class. And a majority, and even though it's mandatory that you have to participate in this class from start to finish, it doesn't mean that 100% of the entire content of that class actually pertains to you. I myself have sat in classes where I know that only about the first day out of a 3-day course really pertained to me, and I just kind of skated through the rest of the days. But in order for me to be compliant in the eyes of my organization, I had to sit through all 3 days. I personally don't believe in this approach in learning and development, and I'm pretty certain that a lot of you also on this call probably feel the same way. It's time to start reevaluating, taking that step back, and start assessing your internal needs for your clients, which is your internal people, and start providing them training that is very specific to what their job is and to really help them perform at their peak. You'll not only achieve maximum ROI on that investment, but you'll also help feed this need to this generation that constantly has to feel like they're developing themselves and heading in that next step or that next direction of advancement within their company. And then rethink company leadership. I'm sorry, yes.
Tassos, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but I did see a comment from Sandy earlier that I wanted to throw out to you. She had mentioned, or she said you had mentioned millennials expect quick responses versus baby boomers or Generation X or Generation Y. And she wanted to know if you could speak briefly about the speed expectations between millennials and the second gen groups. Like she said she's seen the same response from the gens.
Yeah, and you know what, from the gens, yeah, I agree with that, Sandy. You're probably going to see that similar type of response from the gens, but I don't believe you're going to see that more in the older generation of the baby boomers. That level of response, I think, is going to differ a bit. But, you know, in the gens, you know, I will even throw myself in that category. My wife will tell you I'm the most ambitious person she knows. I want to see bigger and better things for my career because I know that's going to lend back to my family and advancement and so forth. I'm 40 years old. I'll turn 41 in September, so I'm not even sure which generation I fall into, frankly. I think I'm a Gen Xer, maybe. But yeah, I expect to see career. I have goals for myself that are probably a little bit out of the norm, if you will, in terms of what I expect to see return on my investment for a company and where I end up being after years 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 for that matter. And I think that also kind of contribute, that also is similar in some of the other generation categories as well as the millennials. But when you look at the baby boomers, I don't believe have that similar outlook or are really having that same level of expectancy or that same level of self-entitlement, if you will, some of the other generations do. So hopefully that answers that or helps contribute to that point. So I appreciate that, Sandy.
And kind of to piggyback on that, Tassos, David asked, is there a risk of stereotyping millennials?
David, I think there's a risk of stereotyping anyone. So to answer that question, in my opinion, is yes. I think there's a risk of stereotyping them, and I don't think it's gonna help anyone stereotype them. And what I'm suggesting here is not to stereotype them, but to just incorporate and leverage your internal L&D organizations to really help just more so contribute and feed the need of your employees. At the end of the day, your best assets in any organization is going to be your employees, because without them, you can't perform as an organization. So why not shift the culture and how you operate and how you help advance your employees and help maximize the performance level that you want to achieve out of them in order for you to hit your numbers and to achieve your goals by providing them with what they need. It's a matter of not stereotyping them, but really recognizing that there's a different generation of worker that's coming into your building now, and you really have to learn to adapt to what those workers need and how are you going to maximize performance from them in terms of investment, because honestly, when an organization hires someone, they're investing in that person. From a training standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, they're paying for your benefits, they're paying for your training internally, they're investing in you because they have that expectancy of what you're going to be able to provide to them as an employee. And so with that being said, I don't think it's fair to go out and point at them and say, you millennial, you learned this way, we need to do things differently because of you. I think it's just a matter of making some subtle changes internally through L&D that can really help show them that they matter as well, and you recognize that they're different from the rest. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me, and I bet I know David, and I bet it makes sense to him too. Sandy and David.
Thank you, David.
Thanks and yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, this is not. I don't believe in stereotyping anyone. I mean, you could stereotype me and think, well, he's Greek, he's hairy, he's probably got a goat in his backyard or something crazy like that. No, I don't, not at all. No, I agree. It's just a matter of let's make subtle changes to really help retain the workforce. Nobody wants a revolving door on their front doorstep. Nobody does. That doesn't help any organization. So going back to rethinking company leadership structures, so millennials also don't look for a boss or a manager or a VP. I actually had, early on in my career, I had the benefit of working up in the East Coast for a tech startup in the telecommunications field where we didn't look at our bosses as our bosses. We looked at them as mentors and coaches, and it was a completely different culture and environment that I had ever seen before, and this was back in 2000, 2001, 2002. Back then, this type of, during that tech bubble, there was a lot of companies that were coming up, startups, and this was a startup, and they didn't have, only you could find this type of culture within a startup environment. And so that company still exists today, and that culture still exists today because I still keep in touch with some of my colleagues from then. But I always thought that was it was the only time in my career where I felt like work was never work. Going to work, I enjoyed it. I felt like I was part of something huge. I felt like I was contributing, that my contribution mattered, and that I had people that I could rely on in terms of mentors and coaches, which is how I viewed my bosses all the way up the hierarchy, and that really helped drive a learning-driven culture that worked. And I learned so much from that, not just from the technical side of the business, but also just how to be a professional, how to communicate effectively, how to engage other colleagues, how to manage up, if you will, on a project when you're dealing with stakeholders and things like that. And I never wanted to leave that position. I never did. The only reason why I ended up leaving that job was because I was working for a company in Boston during 9/11, and we all were laid off like 2 weeks after 9/11, so I didn't have a choice. But I think this lends to millennials as well. Autonomy. So millennials want freedom. They like freedom in the form of jeans. They like to listen to iPods on the job, and you'd be surprised on how many organizations don't allow you to listen to music at the workplace at your desk. They think of it as a distraction. They want the ability to work remotely when they need to. They want flexibility and freedom in their everyday life, because if something happens in their life, they want their company to feel like, we understand that there's a human side of this business as well as the business side, and okay, you've got to go take care of XYZ things. In your personal life today, we get it. Just work from home that day. As long as you get your work done, they don't care where you do it from. That autonomy goes huge with millennials. There was a CareerBuilder.com survey that demonstrated that 61% of millennials want more flexible work schedules, and 50% want more vacation or personal time. Now, if you ask me, I think that goes across the board of any generation. I think anybody that ever works in an office or has to work for a living, because the last I checked, I don't think any of us here are independently wealthy, or we wouldn't be on this call. I think all of us would love to be able to have a more flexible work schedule, and probably 100% of us would want more vacation or personal time. But it really hits home with millennials, because they want to be able to not just be part of that larger organization that's contributing to that greater cause, but they also want to be able to enjoy their lives at the same time. They've seen their parents work, right? My father worked 16-hour days, 18-hour days. My father's never taken a vacation. He's never been on a cruise. He's never been to Vegas. My parents are from Greece. He hasn't been back to Greece since 1986. And it's because in his mind, the way that he was raised, his entire purpose in life was to grow up, get married, make babies, and then start cranking out work hours that attributed to dollars so he can support his family. And that's all he's ever done. And even at his age at 67, he doesn't know when to stop. He's quote-unquote retired, but he doesn't stop. He still finds ways to keep himself busy through work. Millennial doesn't think like that. They want to work, sort of, and they also want to be able to vacation and have their personal time at the same time, or have that flexibility. Is this spoiled or a self-entitlement? Yeah, possibly, and the reality is that business is being done differently in these modern times. I work from home every day. The majority of my time is spent at home working from home, but I'm also very client-facing, so I'm either at home or I'm in front of a client, or I'm on site at a project where we have people on site that are working. So it's not that I'm just sitting in my home office all day with the TV on and kicking my feet up and, praising my boss for allowing me to work from home every day. I actually am very productive at home because of my background of a consultant. I'm used to working out of a closet, out of a hotel room, out of a suitcase, out of wherever you need me to. So it's just a matter of that mindset. But technology nowadays has also allowed for more flexible work schedules. I mean, think about it. We've got VPN access now. We've got the ability to work from home. You can on the go. I mean, heck, even now we're using GoToMeeting to do this webinar today because of technology. I mean, it doesn't take, millennials know that it doesn't take being in the office to be successful. That is very true, and I believe that because I have an entrepreneurial mind or an entrepreneurial spirit, that I know that business can be done and performed not just within the four walls of your company. It can be done from anywhere, and as long as it's getting done in their mindset, it doesn't matter. It's fine as long as it's getting done. In their mind, specifically, the CEO doesn't wear a suit and tie anymore. I mean, look at Zuckerberg, right? Which I misspelled Zuckerberg there. But Mark Zuckerberg I think he still wears hoodies and flip-flops to work. And he's the CEO of probably one of the larger companies in the world at Facebook. So, they see that, well, there's ways within learning and development that we can feed this. Are there any questions or any comments before I move on to the next slide? Okay. So 3 steps to retain this need for autonomy through L&D. Well, learn by doing. That entrepreneurial way can be really taught through learning. If you make it relevant and available at the point of need and by incorporating use cases in realistic practice, that really helps them feel like that they are developing through that entrepreneurial way internally. Will start acquiring new skills, not just by sitting in training classes and having to participate in these 5-day classes and 3-day classes and certifications and all these things, but by simply doing their jobs, by incorporating this into their everyday. And that gives them that flexibility to feel like they are entrepreneurs of themselves in terms of their development. Soft skills, as far as teaching variety, don't just teach them what they the digital applications and things like that. Soft skills are really, really precious to a millennial as well. Teach them how to negotiate. Teach them how to handle meetings. Teach them how to engage and manage change in the workforce or in the workplace. Digital applications and tools that the company uses to make work easier. I mean, they're also looking for that working smart, very much that work smart attitude, that work smart approach as opposed to working hard. They're looking to really kind of take that shortcut, and by helping them, by teaching this variety, this is going to help feed that millennial entrepreneur's mindset. And then update your learning content. I mean, I can't tell you how often I go into a client and they tell me, well, we need you to help us enhance this content because it hasn't been looked at since 2010. That happened last week. I walked into a client's office and they looked at me and they said, I've got 120 files I need you to update. And I said, okay, well, how old are they? And they said, well, we haven't looked at them or they haven't been updated since 2010. 6 years. That's a long time. There's a lot has changed since then. A lot of technology has been updated since then and incorporated to the workplace. You've got to be able to keep your knowledge, your training content relevant. If you really want to keep up with not just today's business, but keep up with the pace of your generations that are working for you in the workplace. Any questions or comments before we move on to the next? Efficiency. As I mentioned earlier, or just a few minutes ago, they're also, they know that business is being done by breaking the rules. They don't look at rules as a way of doing much of anything nowadays in terms of business. Corporate ladder is crumbling. They are not looking at any type of rules to really conduct any business. They also know that innovators and out-of-box thinkers are the most successful ones, going back to the millennial startups of Facebook and Instagram and some of these other technology startups. Not just technology startups. I know there's some very successful startups in other industries, like in the medical industry, that was started by a millennial doctor. It's in terms of how they do blood testing, and so I know that's a huge success. But she created that company, created that success by thinking out of the box and breaking the rules. When people would tell them this can't be done, and they would say, "Watch me." They're always looking at how to work smarter through experimentation, workarounds, and the most efficient path. In my opinion, I think a lot of people do that, but I also think a lot of people get very content in their ways of how things are being done at work. And, in our business, we see change happens quite a bit in the workplace, but a lot of people are not very quick to adapt to that change. But a millennial is very adept. They're always looking for the best way of getting from point A to point B, the quickest way of getting from point A to point B to really get their job done. They really look at what's going to be the most efficient way and the way that I can work smarter. And this is really kind of due to the lack of an attention span when you think about it. I mean, they have an on-demand mentality that the world is constantly changing around them, and in order for them to keep up the pace and to be successful with whatever that look of success means to them, they have to be efficient and they have to work efficiently. Do we have any questions? I thought I saw something pop up there.
I'm not seeing anything on my end. Oh wait, maybe your computer's quicker than mine. I see something from Brandy about, it says,
and I see from Dave as well. I wasn't sure if that was relevant or not.
Well, it talks about many millennials desire more work-life balance and working remotely and traveling. What advice do you have to create the business case to leaders that are old school? If you're not here, you're not working.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because I actually have to have these conversations with a lot of our clients, Brandy, that are, one of the first questions I ask them when they choose to engage us for a project is I ask them, do you want us to be on site or do you mind if we're remote? Because some of the people that I have that work for me are based here in Houston, and some projects that we have are outside of this market, or they're just, they're based, they live somewhere else. And for me, there are use cases out there that prove that working remotely, even here at New Horizons, we started incorporating that because they saw that there are use cases and studies out there that show and demonstrate that you don't have to be caged in an office all day to be productive. Now, I also do believe that there are people out there that take advantage of that, and they, quote, work remotely, and they don't actually do a lot of work. They're only working about 50% of the time, if that. I think that's something that you have to evaluate internally to really kind of help determine where that can be done, and is it going to be, can you trust your employees to really be productive? And that also could be a way for you to weed out to see who really needs to be working for your organization and who doesn't, by those that are going out and taking advantage of this, quote, freedom that you're giving them to work remotely. Yes, sometimes you can talk to the senior leaders till they're blue in the face that remote work is productive in the workplace and contributes to the bottom line. When you're talking to leaders that are of the older generation and that have been around the block and they just don't see that because they didn't grow up that way. They didn't have that in their day, as they like to put it. But there are a lot of demonstrative use cases and studies out there that you could build into a business case to show them that specifically maybe around your particular organization or internal org unit, that it may be better and maybe best, and you would see an increase in performance by doing that. You may also want to conduct internal surveys. We've done some of that too, where we've gone into an organization and conducted some internal surveys to ask them what would they like to see changed that they would feel would make them more productive. And a lot of times they'll answer is, I feel like when I get here, I can't even think anything outside of what's going on outside of my four walls because I'm not allowed to. And nobody wants to feel like they're captive at work. You know, I mean, you want to work for someone that understands that you have a family at home, you have a home, you have responsibilities. There are other things outside of work that happen, and sometimes you can't control that. But that doesn't mean that if if that happens, that you're all of a sudden going to always have something going on outside of the outside of the workplace. So that would be my advice: as conducting some internal surveys, using some of those statistics through the surveys that have been conducted that are out there and white papers and things like that, and then building a business case around it to really present it back to your senior leaders to see if this is something that they would be open to. Any other questions before we move on?
Yeah, and it looks like we've had some other things come in. When working remotely is acceptable, or millennials on board that the measurement is then production, no matter how difficult or time-consuming.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Ken?
Yes, this is from Sandy. It says, when working remotely is acceptable, are the millennials on board that the measurement is then production, no matter how difficult or time-consuming?
I've seen. I would have to say 50-50. Some of them do, I think, and some of them don't. But I think that it does exist among that generation, that they do understand that if you're going to work remotely, that doesn't mean you can take advantage of it. That still means you still got to be able to produce and get their job done. At the end of the day, that's what they're looking for, is they still want to produce for you, and they still want to be able to get their job done at the end of the day, but they want to be able to do it on their own terms and on that term of flexibility or freedom, if you will, by, I'll tell you, to be honest, I do a lot of work from home, but I do a lot of work in the evenings. I work Sunday evenings religiously, and it's because that just kind of helps me get a better start to the week. But I've been trained like that because I've worked remotely most of my career. And so some of them have that mindset of sitting in a coffee house and, they'll find themselves there for 10 hours a day putting in their time, or some of them will find out, well, I've got XYZ things I got to take on during the day, and then I'll do most of my work in the evening. As long as they're meeting their deadlines and are performing to the level that's expected, then yes, I see that amongst the trends of millennials. I'd say about half, because you still got some folks that are just using it as an excuse just to get out of having to do work. Hopefully that answers that question. And, for the sake of time, because we've got 5 minutes left, I want to move on, if that's all right, Ken.
That's good. Go ahead.
All right. So in terms of retaining through L&D, in terms of efficiency, become part of the solution. Give them training on digital tools and skills that are going to enable them to work smarter and provide them time-saving skills. This is going back to investing in your employees' skill sets. If you give them tools, digital tools that enable them to do their job better and work smarter and faster for you, they'll be able to crank out more perform at a higher level than they would if they didn't have these tools accessible to them. And go mobile. Make learning available anywhere and everywhere. I mean, again, going back to microlearning, we do a lot of microlearning here at New Horizons, and I see that a lot just in the industry in general, that a lot of companies are moving that direction, because you've got people that are not just in the office every day. You've got people that are in the field, you've got people that are working from home, and you've got people that are on the go, traveling so much that half the time they're taking their training on their mobile devices as they're sitting at the gate waiting for their next flight. So that, to me, is something that will help retain through learning and development in terms of efficiency. And then also go small. Again, going back to microlearning. Deliver training material in small, short bursts. Again, use videos, use microlearning. No longer than 4 to 5 minutes in length. Doesn't have to be flashy. Just make it accessible, searchable, and even more importantly, make it consumable. Make it really relate to what they need at that moment and why they need it. And the last value is transparency. You know, they also are hungry not just for skills, but they also are hungry for information. They want to be kept in the loop constantly. You know, even myself, I do this, and I'm not a millennial, but I always like to know what company or what direction is our company headed. You know, what does our CEO think of this thing, or whatever it is that I'm thinking about at that moment? That is questions they're constantly looking at. They want that level of transparency from their organization because, again, it helps feed that. I want to feel like I'm part of a bigger and better cause, and I also want to feel like I'm contributing to something, and I also want to know that I'm being acknowledged for the efforts that I'm putting into this company. You know, communication is everything to a millennial. You know, they're constantly connected. As you notice our little graphic here of this little boy here who's playing on his smartphone. You know, these millennials, they grew up with, and we all are now having to adapt to this. I mean, even for me, for example, at a 40-year-old, without my iPhone, I mean, I'm a wreck. I mean, if I'm not constantly connected to something with my email at my hip or just knowing what's going on in the world, believe it or not, at 40 years old, I don't watch the news that much. I get a lot of my news feed from Twitter now because I realize the efficiency that I can get news as it's happening online through social media. This is the same thing as millennials. They want that level of transparency because they're constantly connected at their fingertips. Even, for example, when Facebook changed its terms and conditions back in 2009, they changed it without warning. And if you remember back in 2009 when that happened, there was really well-organized groups and very effective in their protests, and they were all run by millennials. And it was such it was so much that the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, rescinded the new terms and in true millennial fashion because he is a millennial. He began educating Facebook users publicly and earning trust through a communal learning process. He started being transparent. And they came to terms with that, and that's what his audience, the millennials that are glued to Facebook all day, needed, and that's what he's doing, and he's still doing that today. Any questions on this? Because how many of you, by show of hands, literally how many of you really know the direction your company is headed, and how many of you actually have access to their CEO or anything like that? I have direct access to my CEO, and it's not because I'm a director in this company, but because he has his door open to all of us. I have direct access to the president of our company for that same reason. We believe in transparency, and I can easily knock on their doors at our corporate office in Austin or pick up the phone and call them directly, which I think is great because that really kind of keeps me informed of where we're heading and is the company's outlook match with where I want to be in the next 5 years. And I'm not a millennial. We'll go through these pretty quick, and I apologize for time, Ken. But in terms of how to retain through learning and development, in terms of transparency, well, how does your company make money? Communicate this to them. How do you make money? What are you working on? Better yet, what big deal is the company working on next? You know, the more education you could provide a millennial, the more loyal they'll become to you. They'll feel like they're part of the, quote, family in this sense. I also believe in brown bags or lunch and learns. You know, those are really great informal methods, and I know a lot of people do this now. You see a lot of that happening, which I think is a great thing in companies in terms of culture. It's an informal method of learning. It's a real nice social setting. You know, it's not your traditional instructor-led course. You know, and then it's also a very powerful method of sharing information. It really gets the mind juices flowing, if you will, and it really creates a collaboration and good discussion amongst that group that's participating in that lunch and learn. And then share your information in real time. You know, an informed employee is a better performing employee. Keep them educated on business developments, and you'd be surprised how much loyal they are and how much they perform because they feel like they're in the know. They don't feel like they're in the dark. So in conclusion, just to kind of sum things up that we talked about, so millennials are quick to change companies, and they do this for one single reason, And I put it here in all caps because they don't get what they need. And as an organization, you really have to learn to adapt to the multi-generations that work for you. There's some people that do care about a paycheck, and there's some people that don't. And, and some of the things that we're talking about incorporating here, it's not huge in terms of cost when you think about it. You have the capability of incorporating a lot of these at a very small cost to your company or even to your organization. It's not like we're asking or recommending that you completely shift and change it and implement a $15 million enterprise system or anything like that. They want education. They want a company that's going to nurture them, just like as they were raised. That's how they were raised. They yearned for education. They were pushed towards education as children. And so that's something that they absolutely crave and strive for. They will give you 100% of themselves if you are loyal to them. They will be just as loyal back to you. And being loyal to them is by feeding this need of meaning, feeding this need of freedom, this autonomy to help feed that entrepreneurial spirit, feeding the need of development to show them that you're invested in them and you're willing to invest in their development, developmenting of skills, so that way they can become a better employee for you. All of this can be done through learning and development, and I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in the years to come, because as I mentioned at the top of the call, one of those facts, 75% of millennials are going to be, or make up, 75% of millennials will make up the entire U.S. workforce. I mean, that's a massive fact that is staring all of us in the face. Now it's going to be nice to kind of sit back and see which companies are going to take some of these initiatives and start incorporating different methods and shifting the culture through learning and development to really fulfill the need that these millennials seek to help develop them and keep them and retain them as employees. And just so you, I'll skip that slide, and this is my contact information. Please, by all means, if you have any questions about this at all, feel free to email me directly. I want to make myself available. I like interacting with other learning and development or L&D folks, professionals. I like to share ideas, just kind of find out what people are doing. Maybe I can learn from you, you can learn from me, etc. So please feel free to write down my email address if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today. I'm happy to entertain those questions and talk to you. So there's my email address there. It's very simple. And this will also obviously be on the recording. And then just so you see, I'm going to put this up. These are just sources that I used where I did some research on this, just to show you that I didn't make this up, that these are valuable sources that I think that you could also find valuable in your research in terms of how to deal with millennials internally at your organization. And that ends my time. I'm 3 minutes over. Ken, I do apologize for that.
No, that's fine. And you must have been engaging, because we hadn't lost anybody during those 3 minutes. So thank you for your time, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Yes, thanks everyone. I really do appreciate everybody for joining us and taking time out of your day to listen to me speak. Again, feel free to email me if you have any questions, and I really enjoyed it today. So thank you. Great questions and great participation. Thank you, guys.
And Teresa, if you want to stay on for a second, and Tassos, I don't know if you have a minute. She did have a question about, she said, do millennials read the written word, or does everything have to be audio or video?
When you think about it this way, Teresa, I would like to say yes and no. I think it's just a matter of how you deliver the written word. So millennials are...
And she did say this is in reference to the micro-learning you were talking about.
Yeah, so, micro-learning really is... when you look at microlearning predominantly is going to be delivered through a media format, video, predominantly. I personally have never developed any microlearning that was anything other than video-based. And it doesn't, like I said, I'm not a professional videographer. I didn't go to school for it. It doesn't take much to really put something together like in Camtasia or something easy, or even record video and upload it into tools like Articulate Storyline 2 or even Captivate to make it SCORM compliant so they can access it through an LMS. But in my opinion and what I've seen out there, I have not seen any microlearning that has not been in a video format. And the reason being is because, pardon me, they are, for one, it's a very great delivery method for learning, especially in something in very small chunks like a 4 to 5 minute video, something that's very clear, very concise, gets to the point, And it really also gives you an opportunity to really kind of focus down to the granular details of a transaction or whatever the subject matter is. And there's a lot of learning methods there, because through the video you can also incorporate a brief simulation, graphics, things like that, but it doesn't have to be stellar. As long as it conveys the message and does it in a manner that gets the point across, and it's something they can easily go back and reference very quickly, because again, you make it to where it is searchable, very easily searchable, and very easily accessible. They don't have to wait for the LMS to remind them that, hey, you have to take this class. They know that they have a knowledge or a system of knowledge that's waiting for them, that they have direct access to, that they can go pull information from, that feeds that need immediately of how do I do X, Y, Z things, and how do I do it better.
Like blogs, she did say like blogs. Yeah.
I've never seen it in blogs, and I'm not sure if blogs would be a more effective way to do it that way. And I really think it will. And I think my question to you would be, I think it would lend on what are you teaching them on? Can it be taught through a blog? So depending on, and maybe it can be, depending on the subject matter that you're trying to convey in terms of learning, maybe it can be done through a blog. But I promise you, I've seen a lot of blogs that incorporate video too. So it could be a combination of both. It could be a blended micro-learning approach.
All right, I think we're well over now, and so again, I want to thank you for spending some extra time with us, Tassos, and especially the people that stayed on to complete the session with us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Take care and have a great rest of your week.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for attending.